Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Matchett and the Other Guy. And I am here, as always, with my good friend Kevin Fielden, and we're sitting outside my home on Lake Wylie. And Kevin, I have to say, first thing this morning as I was preparing for you to arrive, it was bitterly freezing.
Agreed.
Down here. Yes, but now it's I'm looking at the thermometer over there. It's about 60-something degrees, so not too bad at all.
Now with the sunshine on the porch, I think we're doing well.
I think we're doing very well. So, start us off, as always, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, this time of year, people are very focused on a lot of feasting and great foods and maybe some foods they're getting back to and such like that. They bring
Yeah.
back great memories.
Yeah.
So I was curious as to what foods you may maybe remember growing up with and that was very important to you and that you really miss and can't get anymore and such like that.
Well, there is always this stereotypical standing joke that English cooking is very terrible and bland. But it really isn't the case.
I'm sure that's just
It
like
really
an
isn't the
urban
case.
legend,
It's
more or less.
urban
Isn't it?
legend, yes. And my response to all that is, it's like, folks would look over from Europe over to the United States and say, "Well, you guys eat nothing but chicken McNuggets and root beer," which of course is not true. And there are lots of terrific regional dishes in England. And one thing that we do eat quite a lot in England, which I don't actually see an awful lot in the States, is lamb. We have a lot
True.
of lamb in England.
Really, yeah.
Good.
We have some,
in
but
England.
it's rare.
I should say actually a lot of lamb in Britain, because a lot of our lamb comes from either New Zealand or from Wales. Wales is the Welsh are big producers of lamb, so we have a lot of lamb. So I do enjoy lamb, but I have to say, some of the dishes that I miss the most are the wonderful Indian dishes that from the Indian restaurants, from the
international community and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Large section of the immigrant community in England are from the subcontinent, and of course we were surrounded by the most delicious, just awesome Indian restaurants, little restaurants that would pop up everywhere, and things like chicken tikka masala. If you say to almost anybody from England or Britain, do you enjoy going out for a curry on a Friday night? They're going to say, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, and for me it was always a chicken tikka masala. But yes, I love that. How about you?
Well, growing up, we had the pattern of, mom. Every family kind of has their own pattern, and my mom's was very simply, she would cook through the week, but on Saturday nights we were going to go out, and on Sunday after church we would go out.
Yeah.
And then on Sunday evening it was always a much more simple meal, maybe soup and sandwich, because
Right.
we've had our larger meal on Sunday afternoon. But some of the dishes, every family's different, but we had a number of casseroles. That was a big 70s thing. Everybody started
Yes.
making casseroles. So we
Yeah.
would have chip beef casserole, which had macaroni in it. And she did have one that was a tuna base, and wasn't my favorite, but it was okay.
Yeah.
She did always leave the pimentos out of my section because I didn't care for pimentos. I remember that. But to be honest, we enjoyed the pattern. Like I say, on Sundays we almost always went out to the same cafeteria after church. When I was little, it was called Byerly's, and then later it changed to the name Ramsey's. And it's right there at the University of Tennessee campus, which we
Right.
drove through.
Yes, I
So
remember.
we might have driven by the building, but you get in the pattern, and it was so regimented that we were there all the time that occasionally we'd run into my grandparents there,
Yeah.
or my cousin, or my other cousin who was in the Coast Guard. He'd be there with his other shipmates that were in the Coast Guard with him.
So you're always bumping into friends and family.
At that place, yes,
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
very
yeah,
much
yeah.
a staple of what we did.
Yeah. And of course, the other great English tradition, which everyone in the world is aware that the English love, is of course good quality fish and chips.
Yes, absolutely. That'd be
Good
the first
quality.
thing I would want if I ever get to
Good
make my way
quality
to England.
fish and chips, yes. And for many years, I can remember this as a kid growing up, but for many years in England, the fish and chips, that was a Friday night tradition, actually, for many years. But they were always wrapped in newspaper. They were always wrapped in old newspaper. And eventually, I think it was outlawed because of the potential for the contamination from the printer's ink.
Yeah, there might be something in there that
I
could
guess
be a problem.
would
I guess.
would be my guess, because I noticed all the fish and chip shops almost overnight started using just plain white paper, and that great tradition of wrapping them in newspaper had gone. But I do remember that, and it was a wonderful treat if we were to go swimming midweek, and it's something that my dad was very keen that we should do. He wanted us all to swim, and we used to go with a bunch of other parents and school kids, and we'd all meet down at the little local swimming pool in Loughborough, a tiny little town, and a wonderful old school swimming pool that also had bathtubs and showers. And so for those folks that were living in tenement houses and didn't have at that time internal a bathroom as such, to have a bath,
Absolutely,
you
yep.
could once a week go down to the Loughborough bath house and have a bath down there. You could take soap and shampoo and have a good scrub up in the bath, then go swimming, and then have a shower afterwards and go home. But when we went swimming, when we learned to swim, so I'm talking now, this would be in the mid-60s to late 60s, early 70s. We would then, as a great treat, go to the chip shop on the way back and have a bag of chips with salt and vinegar. Lots of salt, lots of vinegar.
Did you notice a difference being more inland than when you maybe had it on the coast? Did you notice a...
Okay, the quality of the fish? No, it didn't really seem to change. But very much like in England, even the smallest of villages would likely have 5 pubs, for example, right? It was just what? I mean, they're closing almost every day now in England. So many pubs are closing. But back then, in the 60s and 70s, most small, even small villages, would have 5 or 6 pubs, and for reasons which were completely unexplainable to me, even to this day, some folks would prefer one pub over another, and my parents' friends, some would like to go to the Bull and Bush, and some would like to go to the Pear Tree or the Forest Rock or the Curzon Arms or whatever it was. But it was an unwritten rule that you never dared ask why certain folks wanted to go in a certain pub. It was just the way it was.
Yeah.
Now, this is...
We've made our decision, and this is ours.
That's how that will never change. But I mention this because that was exactly the same with the chip shops. Some folks would prefer, chip shop on Main Street, and some would prefer it on College Street and whatever it was. But you would have your favourite chip shop, and you would never go anywhere else.
I think that's true in our area. We're in the Carolinas, and you the different types of barbecue.
Yes.
There be those different styles, and you pick a style, and that's kind of your style.
Yes. And now educate me, because of my few years in the United States, but certainly in Charlotte, there is a vinegar-based barbecue, which
Definitely.
is one type, and you either like it or you don't like it.
And it's usually more. I think the vinegar one tends to be more minced up, like it's smaller, like pieces are smaller.
Okay.
In my experience, and then there's just kind of traditional, which is a larger piece, and you tend to put the sweet barbecue sauce on that. And then there's another type, I guess. I'm not sure how these all break down. There's mustard-based, which I'm not a mustard fan at all. So that is not one that I'm going to choose. I usually tend to do the just regular with the sweet sauce on it. Most oftentimes, like when we're at our favorite place usually.
Yes, right. Yeah, and the other thing that we're talking about fish and chips. I see fish camps mentioned around, which is like a little restaurant that would sell fish and other fried things. It seems to be quite an appeal around here.
Actually, when I lived in Jacksonville, of course, we did one of our dinner events down in Jacksonville. There is a place down there that was the go-to. Like if anytime family was in town or whatever, we were going to go to Clark's Fish Camp.
Clark's Fish Camp.
And it was over near Orange Park area.
Okay.
And it was on the water, so you could boat up to it, or they had decks that kind of went over the water and everything. And I still remember. Oh, it was just so good. And this was, 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And I would always get like the jalapeno poppers at the beginning because they were big ones. And when you cut that thing open, chunky molten cheddar cheese would ooze out of it. And then for an entree, I was a creature of habit. I would get, the blackened mahi and usually like black-eyed peas or macaroni and cheese on
Yeah.
the side. But they had gator bites. We had bites of gator tail there.
And would I be right that they have hush puppies?
Oh,
there too?
I'm sure. Yeah, I think hush puppies probably came with everything. Now I think about it. But
Yeah, well, that's entirely new to me. I can never remember having hush puppies on the other side of the Atlantic. So just explain to me, if you can, what a hush puppy is. I mean,
it's a balled up piece of like cornmeal and,
Yeah.
and whatever. And I think the history of the name actually goes to back when pioneer days or before that,
Right.
whenever it was. that
Yeah.
You'd be cooking and you'd have this little bit of cornmeal. So the matriarch of the family would be cooking, and she would maybe ball up a little bit and toss it to the dogs to give them to hush up while she's trying to cook,
Oh,
and
no
she
kidding.
wouldn't annoy them.
Yeah.
I think that's where the name comes
okay,
from.
so then they're boiled up and deep fried, I'm guessing, is the
Yeah.
answer. Yes, all right, yeah.
But they're served pretty much at every fish and chips place you go to. All the chains have them.
Yes.
And a lot of barbecue places will have them.
So concentrating just for the moment on fish camps, where does that name come from? Where did fish? I mean, is that just lost in the annals of history? Why fish camp?
I would assume, again, I think it's maybe in my head, I'm thinking it's probably something maybe in the 20s, 30s, and 40s where
Yeah.
people would take a vacation to a lakeside area. And
Oh,
maybe they would
okay.
rent one of those canvas tents for the week, or they'd bring their own camper or something and maybe
okay.
just spend the week
Yeah.
as a vacation. And also they would go out and fish for the week for pleasure and for food. Maybe they're going to get a good bunch of
Yes.
meal fish.
Yeah,
And,
so it was based on a family vacation, for example. Yeah, based on a summer vacation, go
I would think
away
so.
to camp and fish.
Yeah, I would
Fish
think
camp.
it's
Yeah, I
that,
get
that old
okay.
image. You can think of the old image in the 1950s of the teardrop trailer attached to the
Yeah.
back of the country squire wagon, and
Yeah.
off the family goes. And that's my thoughts on it anyway.
Yeah. Last time I was camping by myself, now about 3 or 4 years ago, I was up in Linville Gorge, up round Blind Rock, and I noticed I was there for, I don't know, maybe 5 days. But I noticed there are a lot of families that seem to be camping up there, not on a permanent basis, but they were certainly not going anywhere for 2 or 3 months. I mean, they were like based there. And I did talk to a couple of guys, and they said, "Yeah, we come up here and we spend the summer here and we fish and we love it. Just
Yeah.
get outside and we love it."
Well, back in episode 1, I'd mentioned we had a lake house.
Right.
And we had a lake house in a little cove. And when you took the boat out, if you came out of our cove and you went into the main channel of the lake, and if you went right, that took you to the big part of the lake. But a couple of coves over, just at the entrance, was Eagle's Nest Lodge. And then if you came out of the boat and took a left, now this took you to where the corner ended. You couldn't go any further.
Yes.
But there was one called Lakeview
Okay.
Lodge.
Yeah.
And they both kind of did the same purpose. People would come, rent a little cabin, and spend the week, whatever. But they always had a little general store kind
Yeah.
of with them, a small, like, convenience type store. So if we were on the boat, that's where we could, as kids, and take the boat up and go and run in, and we could get our candies,
Yeah.
or whatever, and such like that. And they had, fishing supplies too, tackle and stuff like that, whatever you need. But I still remember both of them. They both had, I know Lakeview had it. I'm not sure if Eagles Lodge did or not. But they had a gas pump too, so you get gas for your car and your boat. So.
I remember you just made me think now, thinking about food and memories. I mean, food is very, the food and the smell of food is very evocative. It brings back memories of where we've been in the past. And having this conversation now, I'm thinking about the cold and the potential for snow. Now, many years ago, I'm thinking about 25 years ago, a group of friends of mine in England, we decided, I'm not sure why we decided this, but we're always looking for the next little adventure. We decided we were going to drive up to Malvern in Derbyshire, which is right up in the hills. It's beautifully green and very picturesque. And we were going to spend a night at what is known as an outdoor pursuit centre. And it's basically very basic accommodation, like a bunkhouse, but very basic accommodation for mountain climbers, rock climbers, hikers, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
And so they would spend one night there in this sort of communal bunkhouse, and then they'd set off the next day. Well, the big attraction to my friends and I at the time, it was incredibly affordable accommodation. So we could go and spend the night there for, let's say it was £5, basically like let's say $10, and it's just an adventure to get away from home. So we did this, and we set off driving in a little van. And it had just started to snow. Now, if we were being sensible, we should have realised that driving up into the Malvern Hills, if it is snowing in Loughborough, means it is going to be very heavy snow once you got up into Malvern. But we never gave that a thought. Mm-hmm. So we set off up to Malvern, and sure enough, the snow got heavier and heavier as we were driving up there. And we arrived at the bunkhouse, and the chap, it was on a farm, and the farmer said, "Were you sure you want to spend the night here?" It's just because it's snowing pretty hard, you may get stranded. And of course the idea of just being stranded up in the Malvern Hills was just more of an adventure. So yeah, it'll be great, be wonderful. Well, sure enough, it continued to snow heavily overnight, and we did get snowed in. There was no way that we were going to get out, so we were stranded in this bunkhouse until the snow plows came through and cleared the roads out, or the snow began to melt. But there is a reason for this long story. So we realised the next morning, of course, that we didn't have any supplies with us. So what are we going to do to eat? What are we going to eat? But we knew there was a little village about 3 miles over the fields that was completely blanketed with white snow. So we set off across the fields, trudge across these fields, and we got to the little village, and there was one little shop open that would sell us one orange, one potato, one onion, one carrot, that sort of thing, and one tiny piece of meat that we could make a stew out of.
Yep.
But they wouldn't sell anything else because, of course, they had to supply the whole village until supplies got through. So we trudged back over these fields there with, the absolute bare minimum to make a stew. The pipes were frozen, so we couldn't actually get any water out of the pipes. So we were melting snow on a gas stove inside this bunkhouse, and then we made a very weak, watery stew-type broth that we lived on for 3 days. We were stranded in there for 3 days. So every time the level of the soup got lower, we would just put more snow in there and heat it back up again. But yeah, great memories. But to this day, I'm not sure that it was the wisest thing setting off into the snow up to the Malvern Hills when it was snowing in Loughborough.
Well, you're going out there with an adventure. Hopefully, Jack London will write about.
It was a great fun time. But of course, we all look for adventures, I think, when we are younger in life. I'm not sure I'd want to do that adventure again, but at the time it was great fun. Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's the smallest little things, that stick with you forever,
Yes, and one of the great appeals to that bunkhouse, I'm sure it's still there. I think it's cool. We'll have to have a look on Google and Wikipedia. We keep saying that, if we have a rough idea what we're talking about, but of course we've got no way of verifying a lot of facts. But I think this place was called Pindale, Pindale, Pindale Outdoor Pursuit Centre. I have to have a look on Google, see if it still exists. But again, it was a quarter of a century or so last time I was there. But yeah, great fun. And the other thing that made it great fun was, of course, there was just this one bunkhouse with maybe room for 15 people in it. So you were absolutely sharing everything that you had. You were sharing with everybody else who was there.
It's kind of like a hostel.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly like a hostel. Exactly like a hostel. Yes, exactly that. But of course, that particular weekend when we were there, nobody else was foolish enough to be there over the weekend. So we had the bunkhouse, the hostel, to ourselves, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah, all they had. We were in Austria. With some friends. It was actually an old college roommate of mine, and he'd gotten married fairly recently, so they were kind of newlyweds, maybe a year or two.
Right.
But they were able to work over there in Austria for a few months as she was studying city patterns and all that, and so they provided them housing and stuff. So when they found out they were going, they sent out an email to everyone that they knew saying, "Hey, we're going to be over there. Anybody want to come?" Well, it wasn't 15 seconds before we replied back, "We will be there." And we did. We coordinated going over there. Well, one of the last things we did, I think it's smart to do this on the latter part of your trip because we decided to go skiing, because that way if we did wipe out, we didn't ruin our whole trip anyway.
Yeah, sensible.
But we took the train over from Vienna to, I can't remember the name of the little village area that we ended up in, but we stayed at a English-speaking hostel there, and it was us and mostly a group of Australians were there. And I think, we arrived probably sometime before dinner. So we did have a communal dinner with them, which was very good.
Yeah.
And then we ended up playing a little bit of a drinking game with them that night.
With the Australians?
With the Australians.
Imagine that. I'm shocked that you would suggest that the Aussies like to have a beer.
Which was interesting. And it was a little bit of all kind of craziness. But, I was at least smart enough to call myself down by 2 and say good night. And I remember I went ahead and crashed. And I remember the next morning we were at the breakfast buffet, and I was in line with one of the Aussies, and I said to him, "Morning, how you doing?" And he said, "Not good, mate, not good." And then we all were hitting the slopes that day. But it's funny. We actually, while out there, we stopped for lunch on the mountain at a little place. I still remember I had spaghetti outdoors.
Oh yeah.
Just in Austria, I just had spaghetti, whatever. But the leader that led their group ended up stopping at the same time. So she sat down with, I think her name was Charmaine or something like that now. But and she had lunch with us, so it was real nice. And we all ended up actually leaving to go to we were going back to Vienna, and I think they were going on to somewhere, but we were on the same train going back.
I bet that was beautiful, wasn't it? I've never been on a train in Austria, but I envision it as being absolutely wonderful.
Oh, it was fantastic. It was my first time ever really doing a train, because in America you very rarely, you can do Amtrak here and there or whatever, but most people never really do any type of train travel. But
that does surprise. This is a conversation for another episode, perhaps, but it does surprise me how little use the trains get in the States. I don't wish to in any way belittle the train service. I don't mean that in any way, but I would imagine, I always got these, looking at the States from the opposite side of the Atlantic, looking over, of course, and seeing all the wonderful cowboy films. There was always steam engines going across the prairies, and I always imagined that America would be full of exciting train journeys, but it's not really the case, is it?
I think once the car took over, it took over.
Yes,
Very much a different mentality.
Yes, but trains in Europe, of course, they do get very widely used. But yes, I imagine those train journeys in Austria, in Switzerland, in the mountains of Italy, and down in the south of France, in the Pyrenees, and all round there. I imagine it's absolutely beautiful on some of those train journeys. Yeah, I'd like to do a lot more of that. Actually, I think I was having a conversation with a friend the other day. Actually, he's a big fan of trains. And he'd been on a train journey in Switzerland, and he says just absolutely fantastic, going right up into the mountains.
Oh, I'd say it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Well, kind of getting back around to where we kind of started, what were some of the dishes that you remember your mother cooking that were so wonderful and such?
We do seem to drift off on our conversations.
Every once in a while we can circle ourselves back. But
that's right, yeah.
That's why we take the listener on a journey. We never know where we're going either.
Well, I'm going to circle back, full circle now, to when we started this conversation, and I said, it's a bit of a stereotypical image that English cooking is very bland, but I must say, dear old mum, she wasn't the most adventurous of cooks, and she used to tell me that when in her early days of marriage, when mum and dad first got married, that she had to rely very heavily on my Auntie Phil. We've mentioned before
the pub owner.
The pub owner. My Auntie Phil taught my mum to cook, and my mum had absolutely no idea even how to boil a potato. She'd always relied on her mum to do the cooking, and so she had to learn from scratch how to do that. Which is why a lot of our cooking was fairly basic. But I mean, we would enjoy things like on an average Sunday we would have a roast chicken between the family, and mashed potatoes and carrots and parsnips. So we did very well. But on special feast days, such as Christmas Day, we would have turkey. And then on Boxing Day, the day after Boxing Day, would always be everything that we had left over that was cold. So like you say, it would be sandwiches and sandwiches. And then the more adventurous of my friends' parents would have a go at making a chicken or a turkey curry from the leftovers.
Oh, very good.
But of course, as we just got into this conversation when we started, we were surrounded by the most wonderful local Indian and Pakistani restaurants that the idea of cooking a curry was really a non-starter, because you were surrounded by experts at the game, so just go and explore and enjoy that cooking.
Well, that's the first time I kind of realized your mom was kind of a little more just basic in her cooking, and that's how my mom was.
Really? Yeah.
Well, mom didn't like anything spicy, so she wasn't going to cook anything spicy.
Yes.
And also, she didn't eat any kind of bean. For some reason, she had an aversion to beans or anything like that.
Can't do it.
Now,
Just
we
not
still
gonna do
had
it.
them because all she had to do was open up a can and
Right.
heat them up, and Dad and I would have
Yes.
them, but she wasn't going to have any. So it wasn't till I kind of got older, I kind of enjoyed this explosion of all these tastes and stuff, because I finally could be out somewhere and order something with some spice and kick to it, and I really I was like, this is delicious.
Yes, I was exactly the same.
And the
Yeah.
big thing I still remember, this was probably when I was in junior high, and we finally would cook tacos at home. You know, just your basic Ortega taco mix, you know, with
Right.
the ground beef. And I thought that was the biggest deal ever. And in fact, I mean, sometimes she'd do it on a Friday. And I still remember one time a friend of mine wanted me to come over and stay the night with them and stuff like that. I said, I'm coming, but I'm going to wait till after taco night.
That's right.
So I wouldn't go
Yeah.
until we're done.
Well, my first experience of, I'm going to say Italian cooking, but the story will explain it's not Italian cooking. But my first experience of spaghetti was with my girlfriend at the time, and we would have been 13, 14, 15. And she said to me one day, have you ever had spaghetti? Well, of course, my entire experience of spaghetti was out of the can. You know, it would be spaghetti with tomato sauce or spaghetti hoops, but everything was out of a can. Spaghetti hoops. SpaghettiOs.
Oh, I didn't know they had made their way over. But
Spaghetti hoops, we call them. It would be
Franco-American SpaghettiOs.
It would be SpaghettiOs on toast was the was what we had.
That sounds like a school lunch.
Yes, it was either school lunch for us. For us, it was more likely to be a Sunday afternoon tea. Beans on anything on toast was always popular in England, I think. If you put it on toast, everyone was having a good time. It could be egg on toast, beans on toast, spaghetti hoops on
Rice
toast.
paper on toast.
Well, we never.
That's really taking us back.
So, one day, my girlfriend said to me, let's make some spaghetti. And I said, well, I can see the biggest problem we're going to have to encounter right now is we haven't got any spaghetti. We don't have it. And she said, I think the posh food shop down in the village, which I think was called Lefebvre's, I might be wrong there, but it had all the stuff that no one could really afford. The posh people could afford to go in there, we couldn't. But she said, let's go down there and just see whether or not they have spaghetti, and we'll make some spaghetti. Oh, okay. So we walked down the village. Once again, it was across the fields, and it took us 2 or 3 miles to get down there. And sure enough, we did find a pack of spaghetti in Lefebvre's, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. But the packet was, it would be the best part of 2 feet long. It was the very long spaghetti. And I was just absolutely amazed, just looking at just the packaging and this exciting thing that might be inside. Wow, this is really spaghetti.
I'm expanding my my outreach.
Yes, absolutely. And so we took it back home, and of course we didn't really have any tomato sauce. So I think it may have been with ketchup. So it was spaghetti with mainly ketchup. But I just remember the cooking of the spaghetti and seeing, how the spaghetti becomes malleable and folds in on itself when you put it in boiling water and all of that. Well, it was a first step into a much bigger world with international cooking. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Spaghetti is one of those I specifically remember my mom cooking, which was odd. Because she would get out, those little electric skillets that are like, 12 inches by 12 inches that you plug in.
Yes.
And she would make this sauce, which was never a red sauce, it was brown. So it had ground beef in it, and I guess she put some flour in it or whatever, and she made this brown sauce, and it had little tiny cubes of mushroom in it, which I would just flick out with my fork. But
you're not a mushroom guy?
No.
But
we never had red sauce, like marinara. And,
right.
And looking back, I'm like going, why took the time to make this in a skillet? Because it was okay, but it wasn't. I would have just been happy with a jar of ragu or prego and some, put it in with some ground beef and stir, and we'd have had a much more traditional spaghetti. But that's how she did it all those years.
Yes, you see, one of the big advantages I think that you guys had in the States is, this. I mean, it's a well-discussed fact, isn't it, that America is sort of, the world's melting pot, if you like. There are so many different cultures and and ethnicities all in the same country, and you have all this different food available to you. But of course, when we were growing up in England, we were so isolated that we really didn't get any exposure to that.
Yeah.
Again, our great exposure to international cuisine was via the subcontinent. So we had nothing, had nowhere to go. We had nowhere to, nowhere to learn from. Of course, the internet was about 50 years away, so there was very little research. But yes, I do remember that experience with spaghetti being just, it's a mind-opening thing. And then, of course, in later years when I started working with Benetton, and we had Italian chefs working for the race team, and I was very keen to, I like to cook, as you know, and I'm very keen to learn anything new. And I would watch the Italian chefs working, cooking just simple dishes like aglio olio, and just spaghetti with olive oil and garlic and chili and some parsley on the top of it. Very basic, simple recipe. But all those seemingly very simple things, it's so easy to get them wrong until you watch how the chefs make them so easy.
Yeah. And once they've done it for many years, it's just they don't have to. They can do it blindfolded, and
I could never quite make it the same. I was a big fan of trying to make aglio olio because I used to love it. We all did. My friend Kenny Hancam, a former colleague from Benetton, he was a huge fan of aglio olio, and so I asked the chef one day. I said, I just can't quite get it right. What you guys do, and mine's just not the same. And he said, you need to remember to do one thing, Steve. He said, you need to take just a spoonful or 2 spoonfuls of the water that the pasta is being cooked in and add that to the pan when you're mixing in the olive oil and with the garlic and everything else. Just do that. And did that, and boom, instantly different. Instantly different. One tiny little thing, yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, but you're not a big fan of mushrooms at all. You just won't.
No,
just
I mean,
won't have them,
I don't want them on pizza. It's probably taste.
Yes.
It's a taste and a texture thing. So
Yeah.
I just never. No.
Yeah. So we all like and dislike. I know there's not an awful lot of things that I don't like, but as we've chatted about before with sweets and candies, I don't have a sweet tooth, but my mum made up for that. She would willingly forego anything else that was available and have 2 sweets. She'd have 2 desserts if possible.
Was she a big baker then? Did she like to bake at the house?
Not really, because again, cooking wasn't particularly her thing. But she would love a wonderful chocolate cake, that sort of thing. And anything that was sweet, she would love.
We didn't have a whole lot of sweet. I mean, occasionally it'd just be on a whim, and usually it's with me, prodding it is, I just might be a random Wednesday night, and we'd have had dinner, and I say, can we make chocolate chip cookies tonight? And if Mom had the ingredients, she'd be like, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
So she'd whip up a batch of those and such like that. But yeah, we didn't have pies and homemade cakes in the house regularly. So.
Yeah, so that's another image that I can, again, it's stereotypical image that probably doesn't really exist, but looking over to the States from England, I was to see these wonderful shots of pies calling on the shelf outside, and, yeah. I always imagined that everyone was eating wonderful home-baked pies in the States, but no, we never really did that. But I tell you the one treat that, and this is probably more my dad actually than Mum, but we would occasionally have a midweek treat of a jacket potato, a baked potato.
Yeah.
And we would have it around 9 o'clock, so way too late at night. So we'd have a light tea around sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon after school. And then Dad would say, let's have jacket potatoes for supper, for a treat, and in we'd put, 4 or 5 potatoes in the oven and bake them. And so, you had a wonderful smell of baked potatoes. I can remember it now coming out of the kitchen, and the skins would be beautifully crisp and brown, and we would eat the skins of the baked potatoes.
Oh, I do that. Yeah, I like them.
A lot of folks don't like to do that.
Yep. It's definitely a dividing point. Some people nope, and some people absolutely.
Yes, some do, some don't. But we would do always with, again, too much butter and too much
like
cheese.
On Guy Fawkes night.
Yeah, just the same.
The same type of potatoes.
Yeah, but we, all families, certainly in England, I'm sure everywhere, all families make best use of what they've got, and potatoes are one of the staple things that we had, right? So you make use of it.
Now, did your dad cook a good bit?
Yes, he would cook. He would cook. He would cook the recipes that Mum didn't want to get involved in. Like, she didn't really want to get involved in any cooking, but, back then, she took on the role of housewife, and housewife meant cooking for
Yep.
the wife, meant cooking for the kids. So she would cook for us, but she took no pleasure from cooking. She
Mine
took
was the
no
same
real
way.
pleasure. Yeah. But Dad would like to do things like, I just mentioned the very, very thin, weak meat stew soup we made in the Pindale Outdoor Pursuit Center place. But Dad would like to do that sort of stuff. He would like to buy cheap cuts of meat that were on the bone, and then make a soup or a broth stock out of them. That was his
Yeah.
great thing. He loved to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad, it's funny. Dad never cooked.
Right.
Never. And occasionally would grill.
Yes.
Occasionally we'd have a steak or something like that
Oh,
on the
wow.
grill,
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
burgers or something like that,
Yeah.
and he would cook then. But I cannot remember him ever being in the kitchen cooking anything. Not one time.
Yeah. Yes. So I mean, I can't say that I learned my delight in cooking at all from anything that happened at home. If it, maybe some little seeds were planted there, but something we'll get into in another episode, I'm sure. It was my 15 years in France and living next door to Monsieur and Madame Fauquenet, and these two wonderful folks took me under their wing and treated me like a son. But they taught me to cook.
Well, and it is a different mentality when you're in a little village in your house and stuff. It's not like you're going to run down to
Yes.
the local grocery store and
Absolutely.
get something that night for dinner. You're going to cook and sustain
Yes.
yourself.
Yes, and the big joy of what I've picked up immediately from living in France is you're going to cook. We said it like with potatoes. You're going to cook what you have, but you're going to cook whatever is fresh that day. Whatever you have in the market is what's going to be for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't say, for example, I don't know. I'm gonna make a shepherd's pie, for example. It's gonna be ground lamb, and then we're gonna get we'll mash some potato and put the potato and make a wonderful English shepherd's pie, and then go to the shops and try and buy the ingredients you need. In France, you would go to the market, see what they had, and then cook that. You'd make
Yeah.
a dish around that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way. Yeah.
Now, sometimes I will do that. I'll swing through the grocery store maybe 5, 6 o'clock, and there may be a cut of meat that's at in their last day, and they've marked it down and stuff, and it's still very
That's the way to do it.
good. But I'll say, well, that's what we're having tonight. So then I've decided, out of on a whim, we're having this type of steak tonight, or we're having this cut of whatever.
I am with you all the way on that.
And it makes good sense.
Yeah.
And it's-
Well, it makes good budget sense, of course, but it's also a great fun thing to do to, go and find something and, this is on offer. We've got 3 of these. What are we going to make with these? I love all of that sort of stuff.
And it's a surprise, and it may be something you never tried before, and then all of a sudden, hey, I love this, and now it's in the routine.
And now it's in the routine. Well, I think we better think about wrapping up our little conversation for today.
I think
Hasn't
we
that
need-
time's zoomed along again, hasn't it?
Well, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Well, gentle listener, I hope you've enjoyed that. What did we start off talking about? Oh, it was food and recipes around sort of Christmas-ish time, wasn't it?
Well, now's the time when everybody's feasting, and a lot of talk is on food and planning food and
Yeah.
and family and such
Yes,
like that.
well, we're
So-
all thinking. Well, most of us are always thinking about food all the while, aren't we? Where's the next dish coming from? What is going to exist? What will it consist of? Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. There's the end of this episode, gentle listener. Do join us again for another episode of Matches and the Other Guy. All right, Kevin, you want to say bye bye?
See you soon.
Yeah. See you soon. Bye.